Welcome to the Calder Farmstead, your place for news, analysis, and shenanigans from the American Hockey League.
Face off one by Condor, Jones, top, other point fence into the slot, a shot is gone! Josh Perry, in double,
left point, long drive, safety running, what a stop by Matisse with the left pad! Oh, there was a scramble in front of the net, denied was Matt Schicker by a miraculous piece of net binding by Matisse Kinetic.
D-laner from the red line sends it in, Hofer in the his net, he stops it, Hofer looking, Hofer firing toward the empty net, he scores! Are you kidding me? Joel Hofer, a goalie goal in the Calder Cup playoffs!
And now, with 9 minutes gone in overtime, the Bears breaking out. Right side with Fair. Brooks Light cutting to the net. Fair and let's go! He scored! He scored! It's over!
Hello, hello, hello from Edina, Minnesota.
And Chicago, Illinois.
Welcome to the Calder Farmstead podcast, episode number 128 for Friday, February 10th, 2023. If you're hoping for a podcast featuring a guide on sharpening shears, shovels, and spades, we are not going to be much help. This is an American Hockey League podcast. My name is Sean O'Brien from Stats Track and the AHL's only league-wide analytics guy.
And, as always, I'm Sarah Avampato from Full Press Hockey and SB Nation's Canes Country.
And, as always, we thank you for tuning in with us. And if you're new to hearing Sarah and I talk about hockey, we're going to talk about some news, as well as dive in and discuss the goings-on of 8 teams around the AHL. We both watch a lot of AHL games. We're going to talk about what we see when we watch the film, as well as use some advanced stats to help us break it down. If that's new to you, you might want to head over to our podcast feed or YouTube channel, wherever you're checking us out from, and check out episode 0. It's a short primer on some of the stats we're going to be talking about, as well as how we view what's important on the ice. So if you're new to some of the more advanced hockey stats terms like PDO or the point shares model, or newer hockey terms like controlled zone entries or Royal Road, go check that out, so you better be able to pick up what we're putting down. I promise it's not that nerdy or technical. It's only 20 minutes, and let's be honest, you wasted 20 minutes watching Super Bowl media days. Someone literally asked Patrick Mahomes about his Valentine's Day plans. Like, there may be something more important going on to get some insight about there. You'll never get that time back, so next time, why not spend a little more time with us talking hockey? We have quite a bit of news to recap. Let's start in the obvious place here. The All-Star weekends, or weekend-ish, happened because the AHL decided to go with a Sunday-Monday event schedule, which, okay. But real quick, the skills competition, Ethan Frank won fastest skater and set a new AHL record. That was a bit of a surprise. David Gust won accuracy shooting, less surprising. Darren Radish won hardest shot, an event that didn't feature Tyson Forster, Igor Sokolov, or Michael Carconi for some reason. I mean, yeah, they all did the accuracy shooting, but they can't do both. I mean, John-Luc Foudy was in the hardest shot, and he clearly didn't belong there. Joseph Woll won best goaltender as a result of his performance over 3 events. Sure. And for the actual series of mini games, the Pacific Division won the All-Star Challenge. Sarah, your thoughts from All-Star Weekend?
You know, I think, as always, it's a fun time. It's nice to see guys enjoying themselves. I feel like there were certainly some memorable moments. The one guy who tried to bat the puck in and Lucas Dostal, caught it and, got a little feisty with it. The guy who had his kid skate, it was a lot of fun. And I think that it showed, especially in comparison with what we saw from the NHL, just a couple of days before, of their overly drawn out, not that interesting, extra convoluted skills competition. It was refreshing to see it was just a straightforward event. Sure, did we wish that maybe different guys did different things? Yeah, but whatever. I didn't at any point feel like I needed a rule sheet to understand what was happening. And I know that obviously it's different because they don't have the same amounts of commercials and sponsorships and things that they need to do for for that, as the NHL does. But the AHL kept it moving. Like there wasn't a whole, like aside from just fast forwarding through the commercials, because who watches those, like there wasn't a whole lot of time where I was sitting there being like, well, something's going to happen eventually. Like they're very efficient, and I respect that. I really do.
I've definitely thought, I mean, the NHL's All-Star skills competition, I feel like if they would have just done everything in a reasonable order, much improved product. Like, let's do all of the preliminary rounds for like an event and then skip to a pre-taped one and then do all the preliminaries for another event and then come back later. And it's like, I don't even remember who was in the finals for this.
Right.
Like that was silly. Lots of things that I think for the All-Stars. Let's start with the skills challenge here. Number one, the whole weekend in general felt very much like it was meant for the people in the arena. At least from my perspective, I watched on AHL TV because I don't get TSN because I live in America, and I don't have NHL Network because I'm not one of the 10 people in America that have an actual physical cable box, and the NHL Network is not available on any streaming service because the NHL sometimes still lives in the 80s. So I watched on AHL TV, which it was not uncommon across other people. I saw a lot of people in fan pages who did the same thing and watched on AHL TV. But the events definitely had a very much not for AHL TV feel. Like that was an afterthought. There was literally no commentary on the skills challenge on AHL TV. So basically it was just the only audio you got was the in-arena, PA announcing, which was mostly in French. And like, that was awkward. Like there was no score bug even or anything. It was just straight the feed from like the Jumbotron straight to AHL TV, no filter, no nothing. And it's like, yeah, that would have been better had they not done that. And like Sarah, you said you watched on NHL Network and you got commentary and stuff.
Yeah.
And like, I don't understand why the AHL didn't just either partner with TSN or the NHL Network and be like, hey, you guys are doing a great production. Can we literally just copy and paste that into our, like, I don't know how that, I don't know how TV rights and stuff like that work, but that was definitely an area where they needed to figure it out. Because I felt very much like an afterthought watching on AHL TV. But the events themselves, I like you said, very much, to the point. I don't feel like I needed too much of a rule guide for any of them, except for maybe the puck relay. Like, I think there was one point when Christian Willanen was about to do it. He goes, could they put the map up again of the order? But other than that, like, yeah, all the events were pretty straightforward. And I understand the NHL has budget to do surfboard dunk tank things, which I actually thought was fun.
Yes.
I liked that event a lot, but it felt very Florida-y, or the like golf, half hockey thing they did. I thought that was good.
Yeah.
And I understand the AHL doesn't have the budget for that, so they stick to basic, your pretty simple events, which I think is fine. My pet theory about Marty Firk didn't turn out to be true, so I'm still holding that one against the AHL.
Yeah, that's fair.
Like that would have been another viral moment you could have played, and you just chose not to do it. Sure.
Yeah.
For the actual games themselves, why are you in Europe? Like, I don't understand how that's still a thing. So don't do that. Like, I understand they went to a shootout and they did a couple rounds. And they're like, all right, the rounds are still tied, so that's good. Like, no, just let them keep shooting. Why are we doing ties? Like, the whole thing about hockey now is there are no ties. Someone wins. That was a choice.
Right.
There also wasn't a score bug on AHL TV for the All-Star games until game number 3. And then it seemed like they kind of realized, let's just take TSN's thing and do that. And like the TSN score bug showed up. The commentary for the games though was really good. The players there too definitely cared. Like they weren't like back checking, which I don't blame them for.
No.
But at the same point, like they were clearly there putting in effort and trying to, make some highlights, enjoy the weekend, which was not the same that you could say for their NHL contemporaries, which I appreciated.
Yeah.
7 20-minute games, though, felt like a lot. I feel like they were better off doing like single elimination tournaments or like with 2 15-minute periods or some different variations, but 7 complete mini games.
Yeah.
No. That felt excessive. I I also saw people who were in the stadium say that they sold out of All-Star jerseys in the arena in like 5 minutes. Like, that's obviously not on the AHL or
Right.
Scott Alden or the Brass or anything. That's definitely an arena issue. But guys, you can't be running out of the thing that you're selling, like one of the things you're selling
Right.
in 5 minutes. I don't understand how you don't have that happen. I also just want to point out, having Rona as a featured sponsor after the coronavirus canceled the first two was, like, I understand Rona is basically, Canadian Home Depot, but like, and they did that, like the Laval Rocket had that as a sponsor, like a major sponsor in the coronavirus, like bubble games. And the whole time it's like,
Really?
maybe I understand the Rona name came from like the first names. It's a portmanteau of the first names of the guys who founded the company. It's like Roland and Napoleon, I think it was. And it became Rona. So sure, nothing to do with coronavirus, but at the same time, it's like maybe find literally any other sponsor. I don't know. That was just a weird one. But overall, like with the usual blips of this is the production value of the AHL.
Yeah.
I thought they did a good job. The players, showed up and cared. The broadcasting parts could have been better, but I'd say final grade B minus, maybe B, like middle B. Sarah, what grade would you go for?
Yeah, I think a B feels fair. Like, could have some improvement, but overall, like, if I was giving this a performance review, I'd say like it met my expectations. Like that's good. That's actually a good review.
Like, it met my expectations, but not the expectation. Like, it met the level of my expectations,
Right.
but missed and succeeded in ways that I was
Not
surprised.
expecting.
We'll go with. All right. We do have more news to talk about, don't we, Sarah?
There is. So last week on the show, I got the great privilege of like breaking Sean's brain because as we were recording, we were talking about the Belleville Senators. If you missed last week's show, as we were recording, Belleville fired their head coach, Troy Mann. And so at the time that we recorded last week, all that we really knew was they have fired Troy Mann. Didn't know anything else about it. Like, all we knew was that Belleville has been bad this year. And they've also been very hurt this year, which is not Troy Mann's fault, but whatever. Maybe it's Troy Mann's fault. Who knows? But like, they haven't been good. We had been kind of wondering, like, is Troy Mann going to be on the hot seat? And then they just preempted us and fired him anyway. Since last week, more information, more feelings, more rumors, more gossip has come out. And like, the nicest way that I can put it is that it has gotten messy. It is like, this is the AHL. I feel like we don't get a lot of like mess in this league, at least like this kind of level. Like, you get your like player drama, but like, this is different. So I will let you just go ahead and break down all the Troy Mann mess.
First, I want to say two things to what you said. Number one, people saying that Belleville's been like blasted by injuries. I'm like, I don't think that's necessarily true. Like, yeah, they've had some guys get hurt, but like Igor Sokolov, Jake Lucchini, Angus Crookshank, like they've all played the vast majority of games. I think Crookshank and Sokolov have played all of them. And Lucchini's played about 75%. Like, those are your big guns. Yeah, they missed not really Greg. Who am I thinking of? They're missing one or two. Roby Yarventy. Like, he went down with injury. They've had like one or two others, but like saying that they've just been murdered by injury is just not accurate compared to the rest of the league. The team is bad because they're not a good roster. But so the big story here that came out and shook everything. And one of the other things I wanted to point out when you were talking is that like, we don't see a lot of the mess. It definitely happens.
Oh yeah.
Like, the level of national media that would normally be doing investigative reporting on these things isn't present in more than 3 or 4 markets in the AHL.
Yeah.
So like, having a TSN, beat reporter on your doorstep doesn't happen for a lot of these markets. It does happen for Belleville though. As TSN beat reporter Claire Hanna, reported that, and I'll paraphrase here, that one of the reasons that Troy Mann was let go is that he had shared some of the Ottawa Senators pre-scout material with another NHL team. And that there was also a lack of trust between like the brass and Troy Mann. And wow, has that rippled through like Senators fans, the Senators, local media, some national media, and wow. And some of the takes on those have just been absolutely bonkers. It like when I don't expect fans to behave rationally towards their team or their favorite players or anything like that. So when a coach that has good vibes, we'll say, among the fan base and is well liked gets sacked, I expect fans to have sad takes or be upset or not necessarily behave in the most rational way. That's expected. The media, though, Jesus, like there have been a lot of just, Jackie Chan meme takes of what? And I feel like a lot of them are just letting positive feelings about Troy Mann interfere with rational thinking here. Like everyone who's spoken, who's met or been coached by or has done regular interviews with Troy Mann, they all have positive things to say about him. Well-spoken, honest. He's a good coach who won games in the AHL. But fans and other, people thinking that we should wait until Troy Mann's side of the story comes out or the Senators confirm this story, that's bonkers. That's not going to happen. When the Stars fired Jim Montgomery mid-season, did they ever hold a press conference and clarify exactly why they fired Jim Montgomery? No, we had reporting after the fact done by, beat reporters for major media companies that found out what happened. The Stars never confirmed it. Jim Montgomery never really did. When the Leafs fired Mike Babcock and the Mitch Marner work ethic list story came out, was Sheldon Keefe and Kyle Dubas sitting next to each other explaining with Mitch Marner what happened? No. The only reason we found out about it was because of reporting from beat writers from TSN and Sportsnet and like all of that. Answering questions about what embarrassing things a former employee did is not something sports franchises or any major business for that matter ever do unless it reaches the level of external investigations into the matter, in which case they then either say nothing because there's an investigation or the investigation is done and they try and do their best to put on brave faces. Like, that's it. That's the only time. And that ain't this. But like most hockey ops personnel across professional hockey, Mann also very likely has an NDA attached to his contract, meaning that he cannot talk about anything or is at risk for a very large and expensive legal battle. Or I'm assuming so. I'm pretty familiar with labor law in America. Canada has its own laws, but if they look anything even squintingly close like America's do, which I imagine for NDA purposes they probably do, he's not saying anything ever here. But for a second, let's put the sharing pre-scout information to the side. We'll circle back and talk about that, I promise you. But for right now, let's talk about what Belleville GM Ryan Bowness had to say. He said, and I quote, "A change like this is a difficult decision, but we are aligned internally and feel this is necessary for the short-term and long-term growth of our players in our organization, as well as the cohesion in systematic play between Ottawa and Belleville." I'm going to repeat that last part because it's important. The cohesion in systematic play between Ottawa and Belleville. Sarah, what does that say to you?
That tells me they're not doing the same thing, but they should have been.
Yeah, that tells me the exact same thing. And we've talked about on this very show how Belleville doesn't play the same systems as Ottawa. As long ago as last season, we talked about that because they use some of the Marlies' own 2-3 strategy in the offensive zone to beat the Marlies in close games towards the end of last season. We have the receipts. They're all the way back in last season's episodes, but they're there. So they don't play the same systems, and Ryan Bowness is out here saying they need cohesion in systematic play. That tells me that Belleville and Ottawa playing different systems was not intentional. The fact that it was noticed last season and it's still coming up as a problem now That's a fireable offense if you're an AHL coach, because that means they told you to do that and you didn't, and you continued to not do it. But that's one instance of fireable offense for Troy Mann. There's also reporting from Brent Wallace that Ottawa told Troy Mann to stop doing the TSN 1200 radio hits that he had every week. Now, he did stop those, but I've heard some of those radio hits in the past few days, and he certainly was rather candid in a few of them, and it's easy to see why Ottawa wanted him to stop. He also said that guys who had been sent down from Ottawa weren't going to play right away in Belleville because of injury, which is a huge thing because it is against the CBA to assign a player to the AHL while they're injured. So the fact that these guys can't play in Belleville because they're hurt, that means that they shouldn't have been sent down. That's not something you want your AHL head coach spouting off to the public. That's not a good look. Maybe not a fireable offense, but definitely a Troy, what were you doing kind of meeting. Still, that's showing a lot of insubordination or just letting things out that you shouldn't have on Troy Mann's part. In the case of matching systems, that one goes back to last season and is absolutely a fireable offense. But again, Mann has been a good coach for them. He's helped develop a lot of important pieces. His brother is also an assistant GM in Ottawa. So Ottawa's tolerance for, some shenanigans around this might be a bit higher than another organization would have. Now, let's talk about leaking the pre-scouts. Sens dropping this news that they fired Troy Mann at 11 p.m. on a Thursday before All-Star weekend. That says to me, and probably to everyone else, they very clearly wanted this swept under the rug and hoped that All-Star game news would just keep it buried. Oh, yeah, it's an AHL coach. Oh, All-Star game, shiny new news cycle. Bye. They did not fire him, quote, for cause, meaning that they're going to keep paying him for the remainder of his contract, which was up at the end of this season. Then Claire Hanna, who, has cojones the size of cannonballs, reports that Troy Mann shared some of the Ottawa Senators pre-scout material with another NHL team. If you don't know what that means, a pre-scout, it's a report that's created by the coaching staff, typically your video coach and or assistant coaches. And what it contains can vary wildly between teams and staff and what they're looking for. But typically, it focuses on opponent systems, tendencies, face-off plays, etc. Some have profiles of opponents' best players and what they like to do. Some include the team strategy that they're using to counter kind of these opponent systems and tendencies and so on and so forth. Now, typically most NHL teams just kind of post this report in the dressing room somewhere where players can see it and look at it if they choose to, or they go through it in video reviews. But posting it in the locker room or in the hallway to the locker room is a very common practice amongst the AHL and the NHL. Sarah, just having been in locker rooms in professional hockey levels, does this track with things that you've seen?
Yeah, there's always something hanging up, or there's the notes on the whiteboard that, they don't want you to look at, but it's right there. Yeah, this is very normal.
Yeah, a lot of times I've seen them crudely just taped to a wall, not at the AHL level, but at levels that I've worked in below. But there's been reporting that Troy Mann is unlikely to have had direct access to these Ottawa pre-scouts to even leak them in the first place. But to me, that doesn't disprove anything. Troy Mann has a meeting with the Ottawa staff in their offices, probably just walked right past where the pre-scout information was, again, just hanging on the wall. And Troy Mann being in that area in Ottawa, while not common for the AHL head coach to be in the NHL, building and in their dressing room and stuff, it certainly wouldn't, raise alarm bells if it was a fan or a security guard or something like that. But people are saying, how did he obtain this material that he has supposedly leaked? I wonder. Everyone's phone has a camera on it these days. It's literally hanging in a place that he probably walked past a few times. There's also been a lot of doubt about Claire Hanna's report and the accuracy of it, which is bonkers to me. She's a TSN reporter on this beat, not some goofy blogger or some season ticket holder or some random AHL podcaster. She's a credentialed reporter from one of Canada's biggest media companies. More so, she's not a famous hockey player's daughter or something like that. She didn't get to this place in sports journalism by, just tripping over a pothole one day and falling into TSN's offices. The idea that she just decided to commit career suicide by reporting an unverified rumor is quietly trying to call Claire Hanna a shitty journalist. And I, for one, am not here for that. And there's been a lot of that from other members of the media. It's just like, my God, do you really have that little respect for your cohort? People who are, again, not fan bloggers, not random podcasters, straight up actual verified journalists. Like, come on, guys. And the whole, no one else has corroborated this. Again, as we've mentioned, Ottawa did not want this to become a news story. That's been very obvious by their entire set of actions here. They made no mention of it in their obvious news dump reliefs, and they didn't fire Mann for cause, because if you fire someone for cause, you then have to talk about what the cause was. And that was, not to mention too, if you fire him for cause, you will get litigation from Troy Mann to try and make, A, get his money from his contract paid to him, and B, save his career, which he might be able to do through litigation. So the other theory that Ottawa wouldn't pay someone unnecessarily, I'm like, they would if the litigation would cost them more than the remainder of Troy Mann's salary. Mm-hmm. Furthermore, the cause that makes letting that cause out from Ottawa makes the organization look bad. The organization that's for sale. How dysfunctional of an organization do you run if your AHL head coach is actively sabotaging your NHL team? That's not something you want to broadcast, period. And Ottawa would very much like to keep the dysfunctional Canadian NHL team news to be based in Vancouver, where they belong. So when Claire Hanna reports this, I'd bet the rest of our podcast's advertising revenue for the season that a Senator's company-wide email came from the top saying something to the effect of, if you talk to anyone about this story, you'll wake up the next morning in a supermax prison in South America with total amnesia. Can't corroborate a story if no one's willing to risk their employment and well-being to do so. Claire Hanna also cites sources, not source, plural here. Those sources also have to be from inside the Senator's organization. So why did they leak it? That's correct that the source has to be from inside the Senator's organization, because otherwise who else knows about this? But it's aggressive to assume that they meant to leak it. Shockingly, not everyone handles classified information in the most sure-handed way. Literally one glance at national news from the last 6 months can confirm that theory for you. I know in my everyday job, I handle things that if I were ever to pass on to a competitor, my boss wouldn't just fire me. She would probably try and come burn my house down. Sarah, I know for your job, you deal with stuff that you definitely are internal only, cannot share outside. And if you ever did, what would happen to you?
Yeah, someone would come burn my house down as well. And also, if I found out in my role that someone was leaking information that was classified, business purpose, whatever, I would be the one going to burn their house down. That would be part of my job.
That's a lot more fun than mine. I'll have to, at my next employee review, ask for an arson clause.
Yeah. You could work that in there. Contracts are great.
Yeah, but literally, one glance at the news from the past 6 months, not everyone handles classified or deeply important internal information with care. So either the rest of the Senator's actions here are a smokescreen and they wanted this pre-scout news out, or they screwed up in letting it out there and are trying to minimize it. I clearly choose to believe option 2. You can go with option 1 if you want to, but neither option here implies a false report. So in summary, because we've taken a lot of time here, Mann clearly did other things to get fired here. The Senators absolutely did not want this to become a story and did everything they can to minimize it from the beginning. Not believing the pre-scout leak is choosing to side with a guy you like over a professional reporter doing their job. At the end of this, I'll say if TSN or Claire Hanna or someone else comes out and definitively says this pre-scout leak didn't happen and a retraction and apology are issued from TSN and or Claire Hanna, I will be right there in line with them apologizing. I will donate the rest of our season's ad revenue to the Ottawa Senators Foundation and do a polar bear plunge as penance for my sins. But until that day comes, I'm sticking with the side I presented here. And everyone else, please just stop letting your warm feelings about Troy Mann cloud them and join me on the rational side of the conversation here. Christ, Sarah, your thoughts?
Two thoughts. A, I personally in my real life am a big fan of if I ignore this problem long enough, maybe it'll go away. And sometimes it works. Sometimes it legit works. And it seems like that's the Ottawa Senators strategy right now. Like, we're just going to ignore all of this. And eventually people are going to get bored and it's going to go away. And like, it's probably going to work. And B, you know, the whole thing with Claire Hanna and everyone being like, you're just lying. You're making this up. Like, I hesitate to call myself a journalist. Like, I too am just a person with the podcast who occasionally writes some words. But like, as a woman in sports reporting, you could not do anything to get me to make something up, because people are going to come for you, a woman, 8 bajillion times harder than they're going to come for like Bobby, retired NHL player, who says something insane that isn't true, but like just tweets it out there. Like, if she's tweeting this, like, even if maybe like all like, you know, like I say in my job, you know, there's two sides to every story, like yours, mine, and the truth. The truth is probably somewhere between what she has put out there and what the Senators have just done nothing about. Like, the truth is somewhere in the middle. But like, if she is putting that out there, like, there is like almost a circumstantial guarantee that like something has happened. You don't just like, there is stuff that like I have not reported because I'm like, I don't have, like, I know this happened. I don't have the like nuts and bolts to back it up if a bunch of people challenge me. And I'm too tired for that. I don't make, you know, the TSN reporter money. Yeah. Like, I'm like, I'm not opening this can of worms, but she did. And like, kudos to her for, you know,
yeah, like I said,
doing her job.
Cojones the size of cannonballs. Because shockingly, I'm pretty sure she knew when she reported this that it would not go over smoothly with Ottawa. Yeah. And I also imagine they've probably had some good screaming matches, at least about her, if probably not at her. Yeah. But again, as far as I know, that, like, I'll check again right now because we have this linked in our outline. This tweet is still up and has not been, you know, issued a retraction or anything like that. So as of 10:40 on 2/9/2023, that tweet is still live. There has been no retraction. So until that day comes, I believe the paid professional beat reporter, as well as everything that Ryan Bonus has said, that this was not like you were supposed to be playing our systems and aren't. Yeah. All right, Sarah. That is the longest we've ever spent on news and notes around the league, but my God, some of that. All right, let's talk about the Wilkes-Barre Scranton Penguins and get to it. We spent a lot of time talking about whether teams are having success and that's sustainable or not. Wilkes-Barre Scranton looked good at the start of the season, winning 6 of their first 10 games, but things have cooled off, as they do for pretty much every hockey team on earth who starts off red hot. See also Utica Comets 2022. So, Sarah, where are the Penguins right now?
So right now, or at least the right now as of when I type this up, because I feel like at this point I just need to, there's always the caveat of something changed before I refreshed the page. Right now, they are last in the Atlantic Division. They have lost 7 of their last 10 games and have seen a pretty fairly steady decline in their standings projection since mid-December. In those last 10 games, they have scored more than 2 goals just 3 times. And they recently lost 8-2 to Hartford, which is like pretty bad. In that game, just to take a little look at that game itself, they gave up a goal 8 seconds in, which I believe is the fastest goal against in Wilkes-Barre Scranton Penguins franchise history. That goal against, by the way, it wasn't John Lazat's finest moment of his career. Penguins win the opening faceoff. The puck kind of comes out to Lazat back towards the blue line, turns it over basically immediately, gets turnstile by Johnny Brodzinski as he's coming up the middle. There's a great rural road pass from Lauri Pajuniemi to Tim Gettinger, who scores the goal. It just seemed to take everyone by surprise, but also come on. You know, and I'm seeing when I was watching this, and I tweeted some of these screenshots out because I was just so like annoyed by what I saw. There's a lot of plays where 2 Penguins are covering 1 Hartford player. A lot of plays where guys are just all clumped up on one side, leaving everyone from Hartford to just do whatever they wanted. The second goal against from Hartford, Came about like 3 minutes after that first goal, so just a bad first period. There were so many instances leading up to that goal from Ty Emberson where there's 2 or 3 Wilkes-Barre Scranton players covering the same guy. There's a lot of puck watching. Everyone realizes the cross-ice pass from Zach Jones to Emberson is happening, but no one actually does anything about it. If you look at the angle from the goaltender, there's 1 Penguin and 1 Hartford Wolfpacker. I don't know how to turn that into a whatever. There's 2. There's 1 of each team directly in front of the goalie Lindbergh that he's trying to see over. You can see him doing the pop-up thing. There's 1 Penguin who's trying to get in a shooting lane, but really, ultimately, I feel like he just screened him even more. So, this is just bad awareness of what's happening on the ice, bad awareness of where your other players are, and things that I feel like this late in the season, they shouldn't be making those mistakes. So what happened? Because I feel like teams don't just fall apart sometimes, like nothing. What happened is Dustin Tokarski is not there. He has been up and down to the NHL. There's a reason that he has always been in the conversation for us on this show when we've been talking about most valuable goaltenders. His stats have him in the top 5 in the league for goals against average. He's at a 2.31. He's in the top 10 in terms of save percentage with 920. It puts him in the same conversation as guys like Brandon Bussey, Dustin Wolf, Jonas Johansson, guys who we know excel at this level, as well as players like Corey Schneider and Cal Peterson, guys who, like Tokarski, have pretty substantial NHL experience behind them. The other 2 goaltenders that the Penguins have are nowhere near as experienced as Tokarski. They have Philip Lindbergh, who had 3 years in the NCAA after playing the rest of his youth career in Finland. He's now in his 2nd year in the AHL. Last year, he only played 7 games because he was shut down after an ankle injury in November. So he's coming back off of basically missing almost an entire year. They also have Taylor Gauthier, who's in his 1st year pro after 5 years in the WHL. He's mostly been in the ECHL this season, but obviously has been called up to spend some time there. They've both been fine, not amazing, not horrible. Lindbergh's not great. He gave up 6 of those goals in the loss to Hartford before he got pulled. The model currently rates him as replacement level. He's in the negatives in terms of goals saved against average. I do think Taylor Gauthier is pretty interesting. He's been impressive in pretty limited minutes with just 10 games played. But his stats put him in the top 10 for rookie AHL goaltenders. He's got a 915 save percentage, 2.44 goals against average. But neither of these guys are Dustin Tokarski. As we've also talked about previously on the show, the difference between in the playoffs and not in the playoffs is pretty significant. Is not super significant in this division. Number 3, Charlotte, 54 points. Number 8, Wilkes-Barre Scranton, 45 points. That's not a huge jump. Number 6, Hartford, where the cutoff is to make the playoffs, is 47 points. That is, I can even do this math, 2 points ahead of where the Penguins are. They've got a 23.8 chance to make the playoffs right now. So for Pittsburgh, Tristan Jarry appears to be nearing a return. I believe I saw today that he was practicing with the team. So if he's not back, it is imminent. Presuming he's ready to go, that means Dustin Tokarski should be heading back to Wilkes-Barre Scranton, unless the Penguins decide to do something crazy like some of the other teams who are like, let's keep 3 goalies for fun. They might. It's Pittsburgh. They've done weirder stuff. If the Penguins, the baby Penguins, get Dustin Tokarski back for any significant amount of time, can they string together enough wins to change their playoff perspective to get back up into that picture? It feels possible because all he has been doing basically is stealing wins and hiding a lot of the defensive issues that we're seeing from them because he's actually a good goaltender.
Yeah, so full disclosure here, when we post memes, some of them we make instantly. Others we kind of have in the chamber and are waiting for the right moment that we feel like is going to come. I'm going to share one with you guys that we haven't posted yet that I made in November. For those of you who are on the audio version, this is Dustin Tokarski doing one of those strongman truck pulls, and the truck behind him is the rest of the team. Because I knew back in November that the reason Wilkes-Barre Scranton was doing anything was because Tokarski was giving them 930 goaltending, and they were still 2 or 3 games above above a 500 winning percentage. Like, just it. So when Tokarski has played 2 games since the new year, I think that's right. He played 1 in January and snuck in for 1 in February. Yeah. So when you go basically 2 calendar months, February is not quite over, but when you go 6 weeks without the goalie that's carried you this far, bad things are going to happen to you.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to another team in the Atlantic Division. Sarah, tee us up.
All right, so we got a sneak preview of what was going on with this team in our last segment, but we're going to focus now on the Hartford Wolfpack. So this week on What Are Your Special Teams Doing, Hartford is the lucky winner of the sweepstakes. They are dead last in the league in raw power play percentage at 13.8%. That's not good. You'd have thought with the Wolfpack getting out of the bad luck basement that maybe this number would be going up, but it is not. So, Sean, what is going on here?
I mean, it is true. We told Wolfpack fans the last time we touched on the Hartford Wolfpack, like, better days are ahead. No team is this unlucky forever. And again, credit to us. We were right. They have been doing a lot better recently as their, puck luck has been rising. But their power play is is not good. And what doesn't help either is they're 24th in the AHL in power plays per game. So they're not good drawing penalties. And they're 22nd in the AHL in penalty differential. And I don't have stats on this, but I will say, having watched a bunch of Hartford recently for this segment, Hartford does seem to shoot themselves in the foot often when it comes to taking penalties while on the power play. I think in their last 5 games, they've had power plays that lasted under 30 seconds because somebody took a penalty. Like, not necessarily a stupid one, but like not a necessary one. I want to say 4 times in the last 5 games. That obviously kneecaps your power play and contributes to you having a much worse looking power play than reality is. But on film, we see some good things here. They have 2 good units talent wise. Their top unit, at least recently, has been Johnny B. Good, Sammy Blaise, Fritz, Carpenter, and Jones. Second unit, Podge Uniemi, Will Cooley, Gettinger, Ellison, and Walensky or Robinson, or some mix of the 2 of them. Now, Sammy Blade is gone as he was traded today in the package for Vladdy Tarasenko, but still, there's plenty of talent here. And this is, these are 2 units that should score more often than 1 in every 7-ish attempts. Also, I just want to point out that Andy Walensky is leading the team in power play points and yet is not a staple of their power play. Like, he still occasionally is fighting for power play time when he's in the lineup, which is perhaps a stupid choice by the coaching staff at Hartford. I also have to think Chris Knobloch is probably feeling some heat under his seat, but, that's a conversation for maybe next time. In general, when we talk about power plays, you need to do 2 to 3 things well. Number 1 is always zone entries. And the Hartford zone entries aren't good. They use the double drop play, which is what we talk about over and over and over again. But they also use the center lane play, which I'm not a fan of. I think it's really it's too static and it makes it easier to defend. If you're not familiar with those, we talk about them often. But if you're only ever here for Hartford segments as a Wolfpack fan, real quick, both plays have 2 forwards kind of hanging out by the far blue line after the penalty killers clear the zone. So puck all the way down at the other end. You'll see 2 forwards kind of hang out on the far blue line. The double drop is when your defenseman starts skating the puck up from behind his net and he has 2 forwards behind him, and he'll go as far in the neutral zone as he can before he'll basically turn and make a drop pass to one of those 2 wingers behind him who've built up speed behind the puck, and they try and enter the zone that way. The center lane approach, same thing, where you're 2 forwards all the way at the other far blue line, but your other 2 forwards are in front of the defenseman as he skates the puck up, and he basically tries to force that first forechecker to make a decision to push him left or right, and he makes the pass the other way, and then all 4 of those forwards basically try and form somewhat of a line across the blue line as they enter that gives them a lane to beat the remaining 3 defenders on the blue line. Both are effective plays when executed correctly, but the double drop works better. But it also looks like Hartford goes off script in zone entry plays a lot. And we talked about that with the Phantoms and their power play successes in the last episode. And going off script and improvising is something that your coaches have to have a lot of trust in your ability to do, because it's literally just, hey, if you see something, go do it, as opposed to the rigid structure that coaches like to impose, because coaches don't like risk, and you going off the script introduces risk. And it's great when it works. It's bad when it doesn't, obviously. And it's not working for Hartford, and they need to stick to these, stick to the script more often and use the double drop, because improvising those entries is hurting a whole lot more than it's helping at Hartford. When they actually do follow the script for their zone entry plays, particularly the double drop, shocker, it works out more often than not for them. Center lane play they use a fair amount is also successful, but less successful. When they do get in the zone, second thing we always say about power plays, use the 1-3-1 structure unless you can invent something better. Not saying don't be innovative, but don't try and get cute with something that isn't working. Use the 1-3-1 structure. Again, the 1-3-1 is exactly what it looks like. One guy at the net front, one guy who's kind of in the high slot area, two guys on the side walls, and one guy at the point. It makes kind of a big diamond with a dude in the middle. 1-3-1. But unlike most of other power plays who use the 1-3-1, there's not much happening with Hartford's flavor of it. It's real static. There's not a lot of player movement. A lot of pucks kind of work slowly outside. There's hardly anything across Royal Road. There's not a whole lot of attempts to the bumper or to the slots. You get maybe one pass to the bumper every other power play for a one-timer, but that's about it. And I don't think that this is because penalty kills are just so good at locking everything down. It just looks like the players, it doesn't look like the players know what they're supposed to be doing when they get there. That doesn't look like they know the plays they're trying to be set up, or that they have set plays that they run from certain looks that the penalty killers are giving them. There's also typically only one wing playing as offside on the half wall, which means that those big one-timers you see at the NHL level from Ovechkin and Kucherov and Stamkos and Line and name a shooter who scores in the power play. Like, those aren't available because you have to be on your offside. So a right-hander on the left side, a left-hander on the right side. And the Wolfpack typically only have one player instead of having both, or because that opens up both sides. So they're in the 1-3-1 structure, but they're not using it the way it was designed to be for, which is getting pucks east-west from one half wall to the other for one-timers, feeding things into the slot, setting up plays below the goal line to the bumper position. It's like watching someone play Mortal Kombat and only use the striking combos and not the special moves. Like, half the point of playing as Sub-Zero is the ability to freeze fools and get free shots. Or it's like being a teenager working at a store in the mall and not using the employee discount. Like, yeah, they still pay you for your time and stuff, but is that really why you work here at Express or Hot Topic? Or like, the Wolfpack are using the right structure here. They're just not using it well. Half the point of the 1-3-1 is Royal Road one-timers. The Oshie play, which if you're not familiar with, just go Google TJ Oshie power play goal. It's half of the power play goals he's ever scored. But there's no setups to the bumper. There's no setups to the net front guy for quality scoring chances from the inner slot. It's a lot of like, move the puck around slowly, maybe shoot, maybe make one pass to the bumper for a shot, and that's it. There isn't a whole lot of follow-up. There isn't a whole lot of trickery or like set play running. It's kind of just, all right, guys, go stand in these positions and then figure it out. And shockingly, that's not working well for them. And I think a lot of that is on the coaching staff.
So last thing here on Hartford before we move on, they're currently sitting in the last playoff spot in the Atlantic Division with 47 points. As we mentioned before talking about the Penguins, it's really close in this division. Only 6 points in the standings separate fourth place Springfield from eighth place Wilkes-Barre Scranton. Hartford hasn't made the playoffs since 2014-15. So do you like their chances to get in this season?
Jesus, what a dagger at the end there. All right, I'm going to give Hartford, all of their fans, 5 seconds here to scramble and hit fast forward, because I know how much some of them hate hearing playoff odds after last season's historic free fall. And I don't need to dredge up that pain unless they are openly asking for it. So here we go. So the model currently has them at 49.5% to make the playoffs. So basically a coin flip. And really, As of right now, with 27, 28 games left to play, a lot of roster moves ahead, it looks to be a race between them and Bridgeport. The Sound Tigers currently have an edge according to the model, but I don't know how much I agree with that one. For one, as we talked about in the previous segment about Wilkes-Barre Scranton, unless Dustin Tokarski gets back in a hurry, Wilkes-Barre Scranton is basically donezo. Like, he carried that team early on without question, and since he's been gone, they've been in free fall. For Bridgeport, I don't have a lot of faith in the Sound Tigers to finish the job as well because, well, prior experience and all. Bridgeport is a team that the Wolfpack also plays 6 more times between now and the end of the season, and those games will likely decide if they make it or not. I think they do, but it's far from a lock. Like, I think there's a better chance than not that they make it. I would give them ballparking probably in the low 60s over the model. But I'm a little more favorable to them than I am Bridgeport. Hartford going further than just making these playoffs depends on who they play, what the rosters look like, how they match up with those teams. I could see them, sneaking past around with everyone as they are right now. Like, Louis Domingue gets hot. Zach Jones steps up and balls out. They keep guys like Johnny B. Good and Tim Gettinger on the roster and in the lineup. They could steal a playoff round from a team that's ranked above them. And, a best of 3 series, they're capable of that. But for right now, with still over a third of the season left to play, a lot of roster moves to happen, probably an injury or two. I like their chances to see the postseason, but I'm not jumping up and down on it. But I think they get there for the first time since Peyton Manning retired from the NFL. Sorry, I couldn't help myself, guys. Just that feels like it was so long ago.
Yeah, that really puts it into a horrible perspective.
Yeah. All right, let's move on and talk about the North Division. Sarah, let's talk Rochester Americans. Life hasn't been easy for the Rochester Americans recently. They've watched their best goaltender, Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, otherwise known as Rifle, get caught up to the NHL, where he had a good January. They've won only 3 of their last 10 games, and yet they're still lingering around the middle of the division standings. What's been going on with the Amerks?
So they have been stuck in that very average middle point in the standings essentially all season. They've fluctuated between an estimated finish of between 75 and 86 points. There haven't really been wild swings, no dramatic collapses. They're just kind of there. Their rolling estimated PDO, however, that is a totally different story. This chart made me laugh when I looked at it because they hit an absolutely insane average of 113.62 back at the end of December. That is the highest for any team at any point this season in that rolling average. That obviously has come back to earth and then dug a hole in the earth and then jumped in that hole. The current rolling average is 93.99, their lowest to date this season. So that's the world's worst roller coaster that I'm looking at right now. At no point in time have they just been average in terms of that. As we mentioned, they are definitely missing Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen. He has been up in the NHL. He was named Rookie of the Month in January. He went 6-2-1. The Sabres are currently carrying 3 goalies, and that almost never works out. But he has been doing the work to force the Sabres to keep him there and eventually maybe make a hard decision. That leaves Rochester with Malcolm Subban and Michael Hauser. Both of them have goals against average of over 3. Subban's save percentage is just over 900. Hauser is just under 900. So, they're adequate, but they're not going to steal a bunch of games for you. Rochester, like we said, they've also won 3 of their last 10. It's been very, again, roller coaster. They've lost 4 straight, then they'd win 1, then they lose 3 straight. It's just very they can't get any momentum going in terms of winning. They did win their most recent game, but it was against Belleville, who, if you somehow missed the beginning of the show, Belleville is in the midst of all of their own drama. They do have, right now, I think 6 guys who are out with injuries, 1 guy who's out for the year, 2 that they're calling long-term, which feels like out for the year. They just don't want to say it. One guy in like the month, 2.5 month range, 2 guys who are day to day, which could also mean anything. We've talked about Belleville's struggles, but like, come on, like, how are they supposed to do much of consequence when like they're dealing with all of this? So yeah, Rochester won a game, but it was against Belleville. Sorry. Interestingly, Rochester is the least penalized team in the league. They've got 131 minutes, which ties them with Milwaukee for the fewest, which was also a surprise to me when I looked that up. Milwaukee is the least penalized team, just does not match my like mental understanding of the Milwaukee Admirals. It is good that they are the least penalized team because their penalty kill on paper kind of sucks. The net PK is 29th. That's bad. There's not that many more teams in the league. It is improving somewhat lately. Over the last 10 games, they've allowed 7 on 35 for about like 80%. I don't hate what I'm seeing when I watch their PK. It's pretty mobile. They're good at pressuring the puck carrier. The setup is just about what you see from any other team in this league. You have the one guy who's hounding the opposition. You stack your 3 guys up at the blue line and then sort of spread out from there. They know when to be aggressive, to go for shorthanded opportunities. Like, it wasn't a penalty kill that I was watching and being like, well, of course you got scored on. Like, it seemed fine. There was a recent game against Hartford where they allowed 2 goals on the penalty kill. The first came off of like a messy rebound scrum kind of thing at the front of the net. The guy just sort of chips it in. The second looked like it just sort of squeaked under the goaltender, Hauser. They're not necessarily goals that I would say were results of a bad PK. The second one, I would put a little more on the goaltender, who maybe should have sealed the post and like not let that happen. The weird scrum thing, I mean, when you have 10 guys all like, jamming around in front of you, it's going to happen. So the PK is not great, but I'm not seeing like huge deficiencies that are causing it. They're also allowing a lot of goals at even strength, and this is probably maybe more concerning than whatever's happening with the penalty kill. They're averaging 2.49 goals against per game, putting them in the same area as teams like Tucson, Bridgeport, and Cleveland. None of those teams are particularly great. If Rochester is going to be bad at even strength and bad at the PK, it's no wonder that they're struggling in the standings and are just sort of in that mushy meh part of the world.
All right. I will say, for the record, since we're talking about it, I am not a fan of Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen in terms of like, I mean, he's a fine dude and he's been very okay for Rochester, but there was a thing on Reddit where people were asking like, what prospect are you over? And he was one of the ones I listed and people were like, Rah! I'm like, I don't think like, I think his ceiling at this point is like rotational rotational starter in the NHL. And that's the ceiling. Like if I'm the Sabres, I'm dealing him at the deadline. Like someone else will see value in him, and Devin Levi is coming. Mm-hmm. And in terms of comparing Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen to Devin Levi, I want Devin Levi, and I don't have a need. Like you can find guys as good as Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen right now on the free agent market every summer. Like I don't think he's going to develop to be their goalie of the future, which they dreamed about. Like he's had a nice little run here in the NHL, but as we all know, goaltending is fluky and short-term variance. Like this happens all the time. But what I've seen from him over seasons in Rochester is like, this is the outlier. Yeah. Like that, some good NHL starts don't erase away what I've seen 3 seasons of AHL work. And none of them has really struck me that he's like continuously improved. Mm-hmm. Like it's kind of like the things he struggled with in the beginning, puck tracking and cleaner movement, are still there. Yeah. So I just wanted to point that out. Also, I brought the graph up while you were talking, Sarah, and it's fun that you can see the high point of their PDO bender, like without highlighting them as a team. It's just there it is. Then you just see it straight. That is one of my favorite features of the graphs I post every week when I do the update. Is like which teams are doing unsustainable things in PDO. Yeah. Bloop. All right, let's move on in the North Division. Sarah, who are we talking about?
We are talking about Syracuse. So last season, Sean banana boat day, finished the season with 8 goals and 32 assists for 40 points. He was in the 84th percentile according to the model and labeled a first pairing defenseman. This season, he is no goals, 8 assists. That's it. The model grades him in the 20th percentile as replacement level. So is Sean Day still capable of stacking bananas, or has daylight come to take him home? Can't believe I just said that. Can't believe I just said that.
Well, let's look back at his season last year. Of his 41 points, only 22 were primary. 14 of 41 were on the power play. Now, neither of those are ideal per se, but they speak a bit to his ability to repeat those numbers. Secondary assists are generally not predictive of future points, where primary assists are. Power play points are fine, but they're great. Like, everyone has to get on the power play. But until you don't get time on the power play, that's when, suddenly that's a problem. Now, Darren Radish is having the season of his life, and Trevor Carrick added to the roster, which means no power play time for the season for Day. And that also is kind of spoken to the fact that he's also rotated partners pretty often. Like, he's played with Jack Thompson, Darren Radish, Phil Myers, Ryan Jones, and that's just in this calendar year of 2023 already. He's also been the 7th defenseman when the Crunch have gone 11 forward, 7D. So it's been kind of an up and down roller coaster ride for him in that aspect. Maybe, he got a little bit of a bump last year for some good fortune from secondary assists. Power play time is always important to production, which we talk about. But, even a few nights this year, he's been asked to play his offhand side. So he is, if memory serves me correctly, left-handed and has been playing a couple games on his right side. Well, that might not sound like a big deal to, someone who's never skated before, who's just kind of, goes to 3 Amerks games a year. That's a big deal. Like, you don't see a lot of defensemen or wingers, for that matter, play on their offside, because it changes away a lot of things like fielding pucks around the wall. Your ability to turn and make passes, making D-to-D passes is now a different angle. Like, those things matter. And playing on your offside when you're not used to doing it all the time is a very difficult challenge, and something that he hasn't necessarily struggled with specifically, but is still something that if you only do it for 1 or 2 nights out of the month, you have to kind of flip your brain around a little bit. And that's bad, because thinking is bad. Granted, also, too, he's gotten a fair share of time next to Darren Radish, but I actually think that's been detrimental to Sean Day finding the score sheet. Radish's game this season has been more leading the rush, joining the rush, jumping down to the cycle, acting as a 4th forward at times. And he's been very successful at it. That's also what Sean Day did last season to be successful, and what he's done this season to a lesser extent. But having a D pairing of 2 guys who are both trying to do the same thing doesn't work that well. Someone has to stay back and, play defense. The San Jose Sharks learned this when they tried to pair Erik Karlsson and Brent Burns together 5-on-5. It didn't go great. On the power play, different story, but 5-on-5, that kind of limits one of the people. So when Radish or Day are together, the guy staying back more often is Sean Day. I'd also wager that Day's confidence is taking a bit of a hit this season. He's still doing good things to create offense when he can. Joining the rush, activating off the blue line, those sorts of things. But anytime you do that as a defenseman, there's a risk involved that you get caught with your hand in the cookie jar. That's the balance of doing it, is weighing the risk against the reward in a split second. And it seems like Day this year has been on the wrong end of that risk more often this season. That's not to say he's misreading situations, but more is just getting caught more often. If you get caught 30% of the time doing something, that doesn't mean 3 out of every 10. That could mean 15 out of 20, and then the rest of them go your way. But the last 3 games, I've counted a few times in which he's gotten burned trying to lead the rush or make a breakout pass or make a stretch pass. And I don't think he necessarily did anything wrong in those plays. They just didn't work out, and sometimes that happens. But then it comes back where, he tries to make a rush, end to end, gets caught at the offensive blue line, and then a goal gets scored directly because of it. Or he tries to make a maybe risky breakout pass. It gets picked off. They get pinned in their zone for 2 minutes, almost give up a goal. Like, that will definitely stick in your head and definitely be a point of contention in your next video meeting with the coaches about you doing this, because a very clear negative thing happened as a result of it. But at the same point, you can't ask a defenseman to play mistake-free hockey and then in the next breath ask him why he isn't contributing on offense. That's not the way the game works. All that is to say that it makes some sense that Day is having a down year. His numbers are maybe a little inflated last season. He's not getting power play time. And his pairing with Radish isn't ideal because they do, the same thing. So, and on top of that, we might see his confidence being down a little bit as a result of, getting caught with his hand in the cookie jar and probably, pee-pee whacked by the head coach when they have to talk about him on the video the next day. Besides confidence in his game, I don't think a lot of other aspects are likely to change for Sean Day, unless Radish or Carrick get hurt or called up, and given Tampa's cap situation being dollar in, dollar out, I don't think that's likely. And we don't root for guys to get hurt, or at least we don't. AHL players definitely do. But I don't think that Sean Day's season is likely to take a big pivot here. So it looks like the banana boat won't be setting sail this season, and he'll just be up all night on the drink of rum.
I'm leaving. One last bit on the Crunch before I go walk into the lake and we go on a break. Syracuse has one of the best forwards in the league in Alex Barre-Boulet, one of the best defensemen in Darren Radish, and one of the best goaltenders in Hugo Alnefelt. So why aren't they doing better than a 21-22 record and 16th place in the AHL?
Ooh, honestly, that probably should be the case a little bit. But as we've said before, quoting someone much smarter than I, you can have all the talent in the world skating around out there, but if you don't have a goalie, it does not matter. That person is Rachel Dory. Our 22-23 best goalie mask winner, Hugo Alnefelt, has been great this season. Played 20 games, stopped 0.652 goals above average per 60 minutes. The model rates him as in the 93rd percentile as a quality starter. He's been good. Max Lagasse, on the other hand, is having a career worst year. He's played 23 games and has a negative 0.712 goals saved above average per 60, which means he's letting in 0.7 of a goal per 60 minutes more than a league average goaltender. The model rates him in the 10th percentile as a replacement level. So when you have that big a disparity in the quality of your goaltending, bad things will happen. Also, the Crunch are 2-7 in games that go past regulation. That's 20th in the AHL in overtime or shootout win percentage. Some of those, should some of those have gone the other way? We're having a different conversation here. Still, the Crunch are essentially locked into a playoff spot here, as the model has them at 97.7% to make the playoffs. To miss the playoffs, they would need to tank and Belleville or Cleveland to come to life. Now, that's not possible, but 2.3% seems high for the probability of that, but hey, I build the model so I don't have to do the math. And in the playoffs, things like backup goalies are rarely heard from, and 3-on-3 overtime and shootouts go bye-bye. So yeah, they've had some down spots this season, but make no mistake about it. This is a team that can do damage in the playoffs. Doubt them at your own peril. All right, we could talk about the Crunch a lot more, but I think that's a good place to leave it, as we ran long in our opening segment talking about the news. We're going to take a break here, and after the break, we will get to Texas, Iowa, Colorado, and San Jose. If you are just here for an Eastern Conference team and this is your jumping off point, thank you for stopping by. Don't forget to subscribe wherever you're listening to us from so you get episodes in a timely fashion. Also, check us out on social media. Links to our social media and more can be found on our Linktree page at linktr.ee/the Calder Farmstead. We're going to run some ads, pay some bills. We will be right back. Stay tuned.
All right, you are listening to the Calder Farmstead, or you're watching it if you're fancy and on YouTube. We are back, and we are talking about the Western Conference. So we are going deep in the heart of Texas to start things out. We're heading to talk about the Texas Stars. They are a juggernaut right now. So instead of just pumping their tires, let's look elsewhere to maybe someone who's not doing what we would expect. So in the 2021 bubble, Riley Damiani was a point-per-game player, and he finished the season in the 89th percentile percentile as a first-line forward, according to the model. Last season, he finished with the same number of points in 19 more games and was in the 67th percentile as a third-line forward, according to the model. This season, he's on pace for 31 points, falls to the 40th percentile as a fourth-line forward. So, Sean, what is wrong with Mr. Riley Damiani?
So I think the question is a bit more nuanced to it. It's not necessarily what's wrong with Riley Damiani, period. It's what's wrong with Riley Damiani 5-on-5. His power play primary points per game is actually going up slightly. It was 0.17 in 2021, 0.2 in last season, and 0.22 this season. Now, that's not a huge, bountiful leap or anything, but it's clear that what he's adding to the power play hasn't been part of the problem. It's been part of the solution. And watching him on film, you can clearly see him on the power play. He's still doing the same things. So that's not really the question here. It's what is happening 5-on-5. His 5-on-5 primary points are where we start to see the decline. He was at about half a point per game in 2021 for primary points. For those of you who aren't familiar, primary points means either a goal or the first assist. He was at half a point primary point per game in 2021, at 0.25 per game in 21-22, and 0.11 this season. Basically, that's his 5-on-5 production getting cut in half each year. That's not great. And when we go on film, he looks like, in the big picture way, mostly the same. Still plays a very north-south game, has a high motor. He's not a great skater, but he finds ways to play with pace without having natural foot speed. He has good awareness away from the puck, good puck skills with it on his stick. He has good awareness. He's not a terribly creative playmaker, but he finds the plays that he's supposed to. Like, he's not someone who's going to feather passes over sticks across lanes or make like a nice slip pass through someone's legs, but he still makes the plays that he's supposed to make. He's okay-ish defensively, but I will say he doesn't seem well suited to play center, other than he's good at faceoffs, which is a very overrated skill, which we've talked about. And I've seen some instances where, like, he'll take the faceoff, but he definitely plays wingers roles in the defensive zone. And I wonder if that's intentional and the coaching staff trying to tailor a role specifically for him. I personally would be more interested in see him play wing full-time, as I think that benefits some of his skill set more. He's not terribly good defensively. He's not a battler along the walls per se. He doesn't really, get down low and defend Patrice Bergeron style. He kind of floats a little bit more, but he makes good first passes and is good in transition. So that does help. And while I can't say what's going on in other seasons, because I didn't dive that far back into the film, one thing for sure, watching his shifts over the last few games, is he is not getting a lot of ice time 5-on-5. Most AHL coaches kind of just roll lines 1, 2, 3, 4, but they'll typically kind of give extended shifts to their top lines, or maybe shake it up when there's a TV timeout and a face-off in the offensive zone. They'll throw their top line back out there. But they'll do that at the expense of kind of cutting some of the shifts a little short for their bottom six guys. So you'll maybe see their top line guys get like 45 seconds to a minute, whereas their fourth line guys, like, it's basically the next whistle and you're off the ice. You're basically there to let everyone else catch a breather. And that's been Damiani's spot in the depth chart for a good portion of the season for Texas Stars. He's in those bottom lines, and his shifts are getting cut short. There have been times where I'm scrolling ahead to find his shifts, and as soon as I see him on the ice, rewind, watch the entire thing from when he jumps on to off. And there'll be moments where it's like he jumps on, and 20 seconds later there's a whistle, and they're pulling him off and putting another line on. It's like, Jesus, let the man cook a little bit. But the long and the short of it is Texas is really deep this season, and Damiani has been buried under the depth chart a little bit here. But those are the breaks sometimes when you're on a very good team with a lot of good talent at the forward position in front of you. You can be a solid player and kind of get stuck behind guys who are just finding more success than you are, especially too if you're a coach and like you're a guy who's kind of struggled out of the gate to get points on the board, and guys below the depth chart are scoring. Are you going to keep their minutes down? Like, at some point, you might be creating scoring chances and doing fine, but if you're not putting the puck in the net as the coach, like, are you going to be cutting minutes for guys who are scoring to put guys in who aren't scoring? Like, and vice versa. Like, Damiani's playing fine. It's just not putting pucks in the net. And some of that is a little bit of bad luck too. But like at the end of the day, as a coach, you have to justify to those players why you're putting one guy higher in the lineup or giving him more minutes. And if it's a dude who's, as you said, on pace for a career low in points and other guys above him in the lineup are scoring, I don't know how you answer that to the rest of the team. But being that this is also the last year of his ELC, his production this year might make this the last for him in Texas. I could see a world in which he signs kind of a 1-year prove-it deal in the offseason to stay. But given the role he's had this year, I think there's a very real chance that Damiani is going to find greener grass somewhere else.
All right. So before we move on, we're into roughly the last third of the season. You've said Texas was good, but how good do you think they are? What is the ceiling here for the Texas Stars?
All right, so right now on February 9th, as we're recording this, it is 11:28 p.m. Eastern, to be specific about when I am saying this statement. With the roster that's sitting in Cedar Park right now at this moment, their ceiling is Calder Cup champions without a doubt. Does that mean I'm saying they're going to win? Absolutely not. But right now, all the pieces are there. Well, the majority of the pieces are there. Nearly every signpost has them points to them being a top team. The Texas Stars are in the top 10 in the AHL right now in the following categories: shot differential, even strength goal differential, net power play, net penalty kill, penalty differential, defensive environment. They also have a deep forward group, four number one pairing defensemen according to the model. The only thing that's been pretty average for the Stars this season is goaltending. Both Dobby and the other Matt Murray have been kind of average at best-ish. They both had some strong performances here and there, but neither have really been able to kind of sustain that over more than, say, a weekend. And given that goaltending is probably the most important aspect of a winning hockey team, that's concerning to me come playoff time. But, as we've said many times, goaltending is voodoo. Could other Matt Murray finish the regular season with a .900 save percentage and then just become the second coming of Eddie Belfour in the playoffs? Yep. Could he tank a deep Stars run by giving up 3 goals in an important playoff game? Also, yes. But everything around him is legitimately high end, and I want to believe that the Stars will be able to overcome average goaltending. They've done so all year this far, and not to trash the Texas Stars or the goaltender who is involved in this scenario, but they've gone to Calder Cup finals before with goaltending that was good, not great, but good. So the idea that they could, sneak a trip to the Calder Cup finals or win a Calder Cup without, 930 capable goalies, that's not impossible. It's challenging, but I think that's going to be the chink in the armor here for the Texas Stars. It's definitely what's going on in net, but this is a championship caliber team. All the other pieces are there. The goaltending hasn't been bad, but that's the only part that I said, if they're going to sink before they win a cup, it's going to be goaltending. All right. Let's move on to the other green team in the Central Division. Let's talk about the Iowa Wild. Sarah, tee us up.
All right, so we're headed north to Iowa, where Sammy Walker is a pretty inspiring hometown story for the Minnesota Wild organization from Edina, Minnesota, where he played high school hockey, but sadly did not make any of the all-hair teams. He was drafted by Tampa in the 7th round, attended University of Minnesota, where he was a 3-year captain of the Golden Gophers. ELC from Tampa never came, so the Wild picked up the local boy, and here he is. He leads Iowa in scoring with 21 goals, 19 assists for a total of 40 points. He is the 99th percentile according to the model, top AHL forward grade. Sean, what separates Sammy Walker from the rest of the AHL?
A few things I've noticed from watching his film. Number one is his skating. I'm not sure that he quite has the top gear you'd expect, but he has burst. He may not win any fastest skater competitions on a full rink lap, but blue line to blue line, he will beat you. He also has great edges and can pivot and turn at an impressive level. You pair that with very good puck skills, a sneaky release on his shot, and you have the raw tools you need to succeed in professional hockey. But as we talk about all the time, raw tools only get you so far. The best hammer, screwdriver, and table saw money can buy can't turn lumber into a house by themselves. You have to wield them well. And Walker does. He reads the play very well. He uses his bursts plus his foresight to get a jump on plays that haven't happened yet, which is why you see him look a step ahead a lot. He also processes information at a pretty quick speed and is able to find passing lanes to open teammates in places that other players just aren't able to. Because of that, he also is excelled in attacking off the rush, using short area burst and a variety of passing setups to attack from the perimeter to get pucks to the middle to create scoring chances on rush chances. He's also good at finding soft ice in the slot and timing his entries into contested space, so he doesn't have to stand at the net front and take 50 cross checks to his lower back. That's not to say that he shies away from the dirty areas. The guy has a lot of battle to him, especially for someone listed at 5'10", 174 pounds. That's literally my size, but he's been a fighter his whole life. Not so fun fact, Sammy Walker had major surgery on the day he was born and 3 major surgeries in total before he was 2 months old. Because of that, he does not have a belly button. Fun little tidbit there. Yeah. What he does have, though, is a lot of sandpaper in his game. And that's been something that I've enjoyed watching him. He has a lot of good standout skills, and he uses them well, and that's why we see him where he is. But like every player in the AHL and nearly every player in the NHL, there are areas of improvement that he could work on. From what I've seen of his film in the AHL so far, he's definitely not the most effortful player in his own end. Granted, he's a winger, and wings don't have a lot of defensive responsibility in zone, but you can definitely see the difference in jump and effort that he has as soon as the puck crosses into the neutral zone. It's all systems go then, and that's okay. When you score at a point per game pace, I've said this many times in the show, I don't care if you play defense, if you could do those offensive things, because the two are probably related. So if he's going to continue scoring like this, don't play defense. I don't care. But if you want to make it to the show and stick, you're probably going to need to be able to either score at a point per game pace in the NHL, or you're going to need to play some defense. So that's something I would like to see him work on a little bit. And while he's been effective off the rush in the AHL, part of me thinks he'll struggle to translate that to the NHL, as he's doing a lot of what you see TJ Tynan, Sam Annis, Andrew Podorowski do. That's attack on the rush from the perimeter. You can do that in the AHL and be effective, as those guys I just mentioned have made quite the career out of doing these things. But at the NHL level, that's not going to fly as much as it did in the AHL. And I'd like to see Walker attack the inside or attack the dot lane more on rush chances. Other than that, nothing really stands out. He should work to improve on the things he's already succeeding at, like burst and shot release, because the NHL is a big step up in competition, and you're going to need to have all your tools be as sharp as they can. But he's got a lot of things to like about his game. I also want to point out, yes, I watched all 4 years of the Minnesota hockey hair team to make sure that he wasn't in it, because if it was, that screenshot would be on your screen right now. He's always been kind of clean cut, though, which if we ever get to interview him, we need to ask him about, because I thought every single Minnesotan hockey player did everything they could after the Minnesota hockey their team went viral to be on that. 4 years at the state tournament with the Dyna, never once was even a candidate on it. I watched all of it. So really enjoying Sammy Walker. I think he's a very low key MVP candidate this year. I think he's definitely going to be on our ballots at the end of the season award show, but it's going to be interesting to see how he does down the stretch. I am personally rooting for him.
The hair thing feels like when you come from a family of accountants and you're like, you know what I want to do? Play the piccolo professionally. It feels like it's that sort of reaction to everyone expects you to do that. And he was like, I'm going to be very clean. Yeah, that's my personal interpretation of it.
I was definitely expecting to see at least a shot of him in the background with some flow going on, but nope, nothing.
Well, there's one in every batch. We're going to round out Iowa with the same question we've been asking with for basically all these breakdowns. How do you see Iowa as a person who covers the Central Division? This is a weird thing for me to say. How do you see Iowa as a playoff team?
Well, the model currently has them an 86.6% chance to make the playoffs, and that's almost exclusively because Detroit has sent down a lot of firepower to Grand Rapids recently. And I do kind of doubt that Vrana and Luff and Zadina and Nedeljkovic stay in the AHL the entire time, but, Iser plan. But should they not, they're pretty much the only threat to Iowa not making the postseason at this point. Sorry, Wolves. It's not been going great. I thought there was a possibility that they could kind of push through, and it's just, it's not going that direction. So beyond like Grand Rapids coming to life with, Iser plan firepower, this is a clear-cut playoff team. Beyond that, it's tough. Wallstedt's looked better recently after a rough start. Zeno Mack is not doing well. And the bottom of that roster is really just loaded with tough guys who don't do a whole lot, the Tim Army special. So I could see them getting through like that play-in round or whatever they call it now,
Mm-hmm.
like the first round where they like teams have buys and stuff, that one, where it's like a best of 3 that you play all of them in one arena. I could see them getting through that depending on who they play, what the rosters look like. Maybe even sneaking past a little further, depending on what Minnesota does, who they can call up for Black Aces, all of those factors. But in terms of a true Calder Cup contender here, I don't think so. Not as this team is currently constructed. But I think they have the team to definitely get in and probably at least be in the mix to win that first round. Maybe sneak one after that and, have a little Cinderella to them. But I don't think this team is going to be one that, we're talking about in the conference finals or division finals. All right. Let us head over to the Pacific Division, the Best Coast, the West Coast. Sarah, let's talk about the Colorado Eagles. The number 1 and number 2 spots in the Pacific Division, they're fairly locked up between Calgary and Coachella, although I will say Andrew Podorowski donezo for the season now. So Coachella may be loosening the grip a little bit here. But the Colorado Eagles are doing their best to claim that number 3 spot so far, and the model seems to be behind them. Sarah, what are the Eagles doing to help put themselves at the top of the division?
Well, winning 7 of your last 10 games certainly helps you meet that goal. This is a team that has gotten better as the season has gone on. Their previous set of 10 games, they only won 5. So they have been sort of slowly chugging forward. They're a team that I feel like at the beginning of the season, I was sort of meh on, but they're doing the work to prove me wrong. So good job, Eagles. Getting players back from the NHL has been a big help too. They're definitely a team that has to live and die according to what's going on with the NHL. And the Avalanche have dealt with, pun intended, an avalanche of injuries. The Eagles have had to adjust as well. In terms of impact on games lost, they are 3rd in the league in terms of value lost in roster absences due to injuries, call-ups from a starting lineup. They're behind only Cleveland and Toronto, who we know, Cleveland particularly dealing with Columbus, and Columbus basically being entirely injured. These are teams who have lost a lot of value out of what we thought their starting lineup was going to be. What's impressing me most, though, about Colorado is what they're accomplishing defensively. In terms of the defensive environment that we're looking at, they're second only to Hershey, who we talked about last week. They're basically like, if this is your map, like Hershey's all the way to the right, and then Colorado's sort of right next to them. Jonas Johansson and Justice Noonan, they've been fine. Johansson's posting some of the best numbers in the AHL, which I will admit, I did not expect this. He's 12-7-0. 2.29 for goals against average. That puts him 4th in the league. 921 save percentage puts him 6th. And Noonan's numbers aren't as good, but they're still respectable. So they're getting good goaltending. In terms of shots in the game, 30.7 shots for in even strength, 28.7 against. So again, taking more shots than they allow. That's great. In terms of special teams, they're pretty middle of the road. Net power play is 13th in the league. Net PK is 19th, but they don't need special teams to get the job done. Scoring is among the highest in the league at even strength at 2.07 per game. It's putting them up there with Hershey, Providence, Coachella Valley, teams that we know are among some of the best in the league. And there was an interview recently that I wanted to touch on. Patrick Williams did it. He talked with head coach Greg Cronin and talked with Alex Galchenyuk, talking about how they're working to revitalize Galchenyuk's career. And I think this tells us a lot that's important about how Colorado is doing what they're doing. It's very clear that the coach puts a really strong emphasis on defensive responsibility. It's something we hear a lot of at the AHL level because these guys know what these players need to do to get to the next level. And this is the level where a lot of guys get that rude awakening that they can't cheat quite as much as they used to. They can't get away with the same stuff they did in juniors because they're going to get burned. For a veteran player like Galchenyuk, who has been labeled essentially as a defensive liability, like irresponsible throughout his career, this was sort of the tough love moment. It wasn't without reason that he's gotten that label. And it's basically presented to him as this is the chance to work on your game and rebrand yourself. This is a team holistically, that seems to understand that the mission of the AHL is being a developmental league. And if that means going back to fundamentals of play and basic drills with guys who have never had to put that much thought into what they were doing and why what they were doing isn't working, then so be it. This is not an organization that is afraid of saying to someone who has been in the NHL, who has had a long career, to basically say, we have to take apart your entire game, but we're going to teach you how to play defense. And the players buy into it. And that's the thing that I think has been most interesting to me, is that they're taking these players who haven't necessarily had success in that way. They're showing them why they need to do it, and then they do it. No regularly appearing player for the Eagles is in the negative in terms of defensive point shares. Their players aren't costing them goals. There's a couple guys who played 6 games or something, but for the most part, those guys who are everyday players, all in the positive. Galchenyuk is pretty much squarely in the middle of the chart in terms of what he provides offensively and defensively. It speaks a lot to the individual player, sure, but it also speaks a lot to the ability of the coaching staff to get these guys to buy in, especially veteran players who might not think that they have to. I think this is the longest Galchenyuk has ever spent in the AHL. And they have got him committed to actually fixing his game and learning how to play a more well-rounded game. Is it several years too late? Should someone have had this intervention quite some time ago with him? Yes, but it's happening and he is bought in. They're getting these players to commit to playing the game the right way. And they recently acquired Ryan Merkley. He is in largely the same boat. He has some other issues as well, but he is a guy who has been a fairly highly touted prospect, but is high risk, high reward, who only really wants to seem to play on one side of the puck. He's a reclamation project for the Eagles, for the Avalanche organization. So it's going to be interesting to see if and when he has that same aha moment that Alex Galchenyuk had and starts working on his game. If they can get him to buy in to actually playing a complete game and not just doing whatever it is that he's doing, that will be huge for an organization that doesn't need any more good players. But I think that, getting a little more insight into their sort of coaching philosophy and how they get these guys to understand that pretty goals aren't all that there is to this game. I think is really impressive and something that shows a lot of why the Eagles have been successful.
I haven't seen Alex Galchenyuk's game in quite a bit, but I remember the last time I watched him, it was pretty clear one of the reasons that he flamed out of the NHL. I mean, defense was never something he engaged in, but one of the things that was subtle about his game that definitely contributed to some of his failures was his poor posture and edge work. He very frequently would sit too high trying to make cuts and stuff like that. So, like I said, I haven't watched him with the Eagles yet, but if they're going to fix Alex Galchenyuk, yes, defense is probably going to be a part of it, but so is that. Yeah. And that's, not something that's jumping off the page to everyone who watches him play, but just a fun little point there. But very interesting there, Sarah. We are going to move on, as again, we took up a lot of time in the beginning yelling about some of the silly things around the league. So let's go and talk about the Barracuda. Right now, life feels like a ticking time bomb for the San Jose Barracuda. They've won just 3 of their last 10 games. And with the NHL trade deadline bearing down on us, there's a chance that just in a few short weeks, this team may look very different. What's been going on with the Barracuda, and what do they have to look forward to down the stretch?
Well, suffice it to say, unfortunately, Barracuda fans, this is not a team that's on the way up. They've already had one shakeup with the aforementioned Ryan Merkley leaving in a trade, and things are only going to get rougher as the Sharks make moves. There is no way that this roster is not going to be impacted. The most important thing for the Barracuda right now is to keep developing their young players, which we're seeing some of. We're seeing improvement from those guys like the Eklunds, the Bordelots, from where they were at the beginning of the season. But that development can be difficult when you're not winning games. How do you keep a positive environment when you know that you're not going to sniff the playoffs? Well, one way to do that is by beating up on teams who are worse than you. Recently, they had a 4-1 win over Henderson, a 6-0 win over San Diego. And while we know this team isn't good, they're at least having their moments, or they're staying in close games sometimes against better teams. They had 2 3-2 losses recently to Abbotsford. They had a 5-4 loss to Bakersfield, a 3-2 loss to Coachella Valley. So it's not like they're getting blown out in every single game. They are being competitive with teams that rightfully they maybe should not have been competitive with. And the inconsistency is really the huge thing for the Barracuda, which feels like a hallmark of a young team with B, an inexperienced head coach. They lost to Coachella Valley by that 1 goal, and I think that one went to a shootout. But they also were on the receiving end of 2 4-0 blowouts from Coachella Valley. So it's like you never entirely know which version of the Barracuda you're going to be getting at any given night. We've talked previously on the show about special teams for the Barracuda, and I unfortunately have to report that things have taken a nosedive lately. The power play and penalty kill are now both struggling for the Barracuda. Net power play is 26th in the league. Net penalty kill is 22nd. When we talked about the Barracuda in November, I went and looked it up. Their net PK was 1st in the league.
Oof, Barracuda.
So, yeah. Amazing. You don't have to be a numbers person to know that is a very dramatic downswing. At some point, like, something just fell apart and they are trying to claw their way back out. I look back at their last 10 games, though. They allowed 7 on 41 chances. So that's an 83% success rate, which isn't bad. Like, that's back to where they should be. So something in that middle chunk of the season just imploded. Who hockey, it's magic. Who knows? But still, okay, 7 on 41 chances over 10 games. But that's also 6 out of 10 games that they allow to go on the penalty kill in the first place. And it's important to consider that they are one of the most penalized teams in the league. Over the last 10 games, there is no game in which they've taken fewer than 3 penalties. There was one game where they had 6 against the Gulls. So they are spending more than their fair share of time in the penalty box on the penalty kill. Fortunately, that game was against the Gulls, so they didn't get scored on. But still, you don't want to be putting yourself in that position. You don't want to be taxing your penalty killers, your goaltenders, by constantly being on the PK. But that is what the Barracuda are doing. I said this with Belleville last week, and I'll say it again here. If you're going to take that many penalties, you have to learn how to kill them. And San Jose, for whatever reason, fell apart. For the most part, for the season that they have been good at the penalty kill. It looks like they're trying to right the ship, but they have dug themselves a very big hole. So it's good to see that they're trending upwards, but that, like, I would have loved to like actually be able to do the deep dive into like everything that happened between November and now, because that is a huge collapse in that PK that I think is not doing them any favors. They're not going to climb out of the basement of the standings, but they at least could have pretended to if that PK had not just imploded at some point.
All right. Seeing as we're running long here, I'm not even going to try and dress it up. We're going to go right into start bench ship. Sarah, are you ready?
Let's do it.
All right. First in start bench ship, we are going to talk about rule changes. Are we going with A, color on color jerseys, B, no offsides, or C, endless 3-on-3 overtime and no more shootouts? Sarah, kick us off. How you feeling about this?
Oh boy. We are going to here Agent of Chaos here. We're going to start no offsides. Screw it. You do what you want. You want to cherry pick? Fine. Have fun. Go at it. Like, give me chaos. Let's do it. We are going to bench color on color jerseys. I actually love this idea, but it's the rules of the game. You got to pick one. We're shipping endless 3-on-3 until I can be sure that they're not going to somehow turn it into like a very boring gimmick.
Interesting. So like you're talking about the like everyone's recycling and we're pulling out. Yeah.
Yes.
All right. I am starting color on color jerseys. This is something that we needed to get rid of years ago. TVs are not black and white anymore. And yes, there needs to be some rules about a red team playing a green team because color blindness exists. And red green is one of them. But like, I play, beer league hockey and we all the time play color on color, and it's fine. Nobody's confused. We all can see, like everyone knows what team the other guy's on. So like the fact that we're in the year of our Lord 2023, abiding by broadcast guidelines from black and white television. Stop. I am benching endless 3-on-3 overtime. As an analyst, I hate the shootout. As a coach, I hate the shootout. As a player, I love the shootout because I'm good at it. And as a fan, I love the shootout because it keeps you on the edge of your seat. If anyone tells you they don't enjoy the shootouts, they've never bet on hockey. Because the shootout is entertaining as hell if you have money on that game and need the shootout to go your way. You are on the edge of your seat. So I understand why people want to get rid of the shootout, and 3-on-3 is genuinely fun. So I'm good with that. I can't get on board with the no offsides. Like the only way I think that I could be on board with the no offsides is if it was part of endless 3-on-3 overtime.
Ooh.
Then maybe we could have some conversations, but part of normal 5-on-5 play, that is a bridge too far for me. It's that like bigger nets and like those are the two. I'm like, no. Not to mention like, look at that rink. How goofy does that look with no blue line?
It's so dumb.
It looks weird. It looks objectively weird. So that one's getting the ship for me. All right. Next up here, we are going former AHL teams. Since Scott Housen in his AHL State of the AHL address talked about nobody was relocating. Let's talk about some teams that did. I will go first. I am starting the Houston Aeros. That was a good mark for the league that I feel like needs to bring back more teams that can act as kind of a middle point between Texas and Iowa, or Texas and Rockford. Like we need Oklahoma City and Houston to come back because that gives at least some, geographic balance. Not to mention like the Aeros were good. They were not like a junk team that, some, negligent owner ran into the ground. Like they were a successful team that left for for reasons that were not poor performance or bad attendance. I am benching the Albany River Rats. They won a Calder Cup, and I thought their like River Rat name was fun. Like they did a good job of blending it with all of their affiliates. Their fans were not terrible. Albany's the capital, and it was a good market. And when they were winning, they were doing well. It's just when they had negligent owners who tried to run the team on a shoestring budget, it didn't work. So I would be okay with bringing them back. I am shipping the Peoria Rivermen down to the Fed, not to the ECHL, all the way down. Why? 2 words. Dave Eminian. Like that man is outsourced team PR. He is genuinely a horrible, horrible hockey writer. And he is someone whose work I have read, unfortunately. He's bad. And he continues to this day to basically be outsourced team PR instead of a journalist. It's embarrassing. Sarah, your thoughts.
So I am going in the same order as you for vastly different reasons. I am doing this purely on vibes of the logo. I am starting the Houston Aeros. I have been on a huge plane kick lately. I just was out in California and went to 2 different plane museums. Shout out to Palm Springs and Chino, California for having excellent plane museums. I love when they turn the nose of the plane into something with teeth. That's very exciting to me. So I'm starting the Houston Aeros. I am benching the Albany River Rats. I like the concept, but it looks a little 90s clip artish. And so I feel like I want them to spruce up that rat. And Pure Rivermen, I'm shipping that one because I don't like anything that's happening there in terms of the logo. No, thank you.
That's very fair. All right. Last, it is, Super Bowl weekend coming up here. So let us do some Super Bowl rooting. Sarah, start bench ship. The Eagles, the Chiefs, or the commercials?
We are obviously starting the commercials, particularly as someone who doesn't really care too much about football. It's the most entertaining part of the show. We are benching the Chiefs because you got to pick one to bench. I am shipping the Eagles because as someone born and raised in the Pittsburgh side of Pennsylvania, I cannot contractually ever want anything nice for anything out of Philadelphia. So we are shipping the Eagles as far away as I possibly can.
I respect the shade. I do. I'm obviously starting the commercials. This matchup, I'm just hoping for an entertaining game, to be honest. I don't have rooting interests on either side. So, like, they're fun storylines. The Kelsey brothers, Andy Reid versus the team he coached for forever and was fired because of their inability to get to a Super Bowl or win a Super Bowl, rather. So yeah, commercials are definitely what I'm here for. I'm gonna bench the Eagles. My uncle is a big Eagles fan, and he's been one of my favorite family members, and that'll be fun for him. I also have family that lives out there as well. My brother-in-law is in Philly, and while he is not an Eagles fan, going to the championship and watching the city burn, always a good time. So I'm going to bench the Eagles for that cause. I'm shipping the Chiefs. They've had enough good things. Like it's fine. The Eagles can take this one. I don't have a rooting interest. I'm just hoping for a fun game because the last 4 Super Bowls have been very. Yeah. So I'm hoping for something that is at least as entertaining as the commercials. All right, Sarah, any closing thoughts?
I just hope everyone has a good time.
I hope everyone has a good time. And if they have access to documents that are internal only, they do so responsibly. Take us out, Sarah.
That is it for today's show. Thank you so much for watching and or listening. The Calder Farmstead is a part of the Full Press Radio Network. You can listen to this and several other great hockey, sports, and sports entertainment programs, all at www.fullpresscoverage.com. Just click the podcast drop-down menu in the top right portion of the website and enjoy.
And if you are enjoying the Calder Farmstead, please make sure you subscribe so you get episodes in a timely fashion. Also, if you're listening on Apple, Spotify, or Amazon, please leave a rating or a review of the podcast or both. If you're watching on YouTube, like the video, comment what you thought of the episode. Doing these things helps others find the show, and your reviews help us improve it. You can also follow the show on social media. We have a pretty good time there. We post some memes. We screw around. You can follow us on social media at Calder Farmstead on Twitter, at The Calder Farmstead on Instagram and Facebook. Links to all of that and more, including our merch store, where you can get this pretty nice looking sweatshirt that can be found in our Linktree page at linktr.ee/The Calder Farmstead. Big thanks to Adrian Drake, who made our theme music. You can find him on social media at AD_dysfunction. That's AD_DYSFUNCTION, so we can make music for you. Sarah, where can people find you?
All right, my name is Sarah Avampato. You can find me representing Full Press Hockey on Twitter at Right Said Sarah. That's WRITE said Sarah with an H. You can check out my writing at Full Press Hockey, where I talk about the Ontario Reign, or over at Canes Country, where I talk about the Chicago Wolves. Sean, where can folks find you?
I'm Sean O'Brien. You can find me on Twitter at Sean O'Brien81. That's SeanObrien81. Or as long as Twitter is still functioning, I guess. I'm also on Instagram at Sean O'Brien _81. You can find my stats work on Tableau at bit.ly/datadump-and-chase, all lowercase, all one word. Thank you for tuning into the show. For Sarah Avampato, I am Sean O'Brien, and as always, please dump and chase responsibly.